Hi Roadrunners, my name is Elaine Rodriguez. I am the Student Success Coach in the Transfer Center. Today I'm going to be talking to you about transferring 101 to the CSUs. Before we get started, I just wanted to go over some community college knowledge, a little pop quiz. I'm sorry if you've already seen the other videos about transferring to UCs or private universities. You may or may have not already seen this quiz. But for number one, I'm going to go over Rio Hondo College helps students transfer to CSU, UC, private universities, and out-of-state colleges. That is true. Fortunately enough, we have other resources to help you transfer to schools in Southern California, Northern California, if you want to do private universities or out of state. Number two, when you apply for a transfer from a community college to a CSU or a UC, you must also submit your high school transcript and take the SAT or the ACT. You don't have to, that is false. Students, sometimes if you are applying to a private, you will have to submit your high school transcripts, or if you took the SAT or the ACT during high school, you do have to sometimes show proof of those scores. But if you're just doing the CSU or the UC, you don't have to worry about that. Number three, when you transfer to a four-year university from a community college, you transfer as a freshman. That is false. So you would transfer as a junior, but because you have already completed the 60 units that are required of you in order to transfer. So when you do transfer, you should already be a junior status, and it should take you at least 2 more years in order to receive your bachelor's degree. However, sometimes that's not always the same for every student. It might take you more. There are certain cases where it actually takes you less. So it all depends on how you're wanting to pace your classes, how many classes you want to take, and also your majors. Some majors don't require as many courses as others. So number four, you cannot transfer with an undecided major. That is actually very true. You do need to decide on a major when you do transfer, but because you're transferring as a junior status, you can't really transfer as a junior without having a major decided. So number five, you must complete 60 transferable units before transferring to a UC or CSU. I know I mentioned that a little bit earlier, but yeah, that is true. So you do need 60 units minimum in order to transfer. Some students can go a little bit more. So for example, I know when I transferred, I think I transferred with 78 units. So that's like on the higher side, but you do need at least 60. Number six, you must obtain an associate degree in order to transfer to a UC or CSU. That is false. I'll go into more detail about the associate's degree and what that is and how that might be beneficial to you, but you don't need it. You can just transfer out with using assist, and I'll talk more about that later. Alrighty, so for California State Universities, there are 23 campuses across California. I'm not sure if you're able to see the image that I have provided here, but we have San Diego, San Marcos, Fullerton, Pomona, San Bernardino, Long Beach, Dominguez Hills, Los Angeles, Northridge, Channel Islands, Bakersfield, San Luis Obispo, Fresno, Monterey Bay, Stanislaus, San Jose, East Bay, San Francisco, Sacramento, Maritime, Sonoma, Chico, and Humboldt. So if you notice, as you go a little bit more up the north, they're kind of spaced out. Of the 23 CSU campuses that we have, our local area consideration is Cal State LA, and what that means is that they give students at Rio Hondo local area consideration, so you might have an advantage at being admitted. The CSU campuses combine theory and practice, so sometimes what you will find is that there are certain majors that CSUs offer that are not offered at the UCs. Some examples are hotel management, rehabilitation services, child development, criminal justice, and nursing. You won't see those majors provided at the UCs. The CSUs are also designed for daytime, part-time students, and they offer weekend classes available. Classes are really flexible. You know, they try to cater to all types of students that are either working full-time, part-time, if you prefer earlier classes, evening classes. And another thing is that the CSU campuses offer bachelor's, master's, and doctorate degrees. So you could honestly get any type of degree at a campus. Okay, so let's talk about minimum requirements. So again, I mentioned a little bit earlier, you do need 60 transferable units. And what does transferable mean? That just means it has to be 100 level or above. So let's say you're taking like a math 70 class, that would not count as a transferable math class. However, if you're taking a math 130 or 160 class, that will definitely count. So just make sure that the classes that you are taking start with 100. GPA, you do need a minimum 2.0 GPA, but that is for California residents. If you are a non-resident of California, you do need a 2.4 GPA. Another minimum requirement you need is that you would have to complete the Golden 4 courses. And these courses are A1, A2, A3, and B4 on the CSU general education sheet. So the A1 area is one course in oral communication. That is usually your Speech 101 class. A2 would be one course in English composition, usually your English 101. Your A3 is a course in critical thinking, so that would be your English 201. And then before, one transferable math course. So a math course that is at least a 100 level or above. And you need to pass all of these classes with a C or better. All right, so now we talked about the minimum requirements, but let's go ahead and talk about how to be competitive when applying to the CSUs. Sometimes the minimum requirements are just not enough. Also, you know, all these campuses across California, they're becoming more and more impacted. Majors are becoming impacted, so the requirements are increasing, they're going higher. So these are some of the things that you can do to be competitive, but they're depending on your major and what school you are applying to, there may be added more things. However, this is just a general idea. So you do need to complete your general ed pattern, such as your CSU GE Breath or your iGETC. So general ed patterns. That's a sheet that gives you all the classes that you need to take. It will give you a long list. You do not have to take all the classes in each area. It's just at least one class or the requirements that they give. So they'll specify whether you need 6 units, 9 units, 3 units. It all depends. You could find these general education patterns on our Transfer Center website. It is actually under the General Ed Pattern tab. We have one for the CSU, so if you're only applying to a CSU, you would be following that pattern. However, if you're undecided if you want to attend a CSU or a UC, you are given the option of the iGETC pattern. So that one you can complete, and it is good for the CSUs and the UCs. You need to complete some major prep. So what does major prep mean? In the next slide, I believe I'm going to be going into more depth of assist.org, and that is a website that you can utilize. You can put that you're transferring from Rio Hondo, what's your major, and it'll give you a list of courses that you can take, and those are major prep courses, and what the school that you're particularly transferring to wants to look for when you're applying. So another thing that you can do is to achieve a competitive GPA. So it all depends on campus really, and sometimes your major. Some CSUs have a significantly higher GPA requirement than others. So an example that we have here is that for the 2018 Cal State Fullerton applicant average GPA, it was a 3.5. But for Long Beach, for their psychology major, that was a 3.7. So it all depends. And that's really more about doing some research. So if you ever decide on a school and a major, always come to the Transfer Center so we can do that research, see what GPA you need and what other requirements you're kind of looking for. Another thing to be competitive, complete an ADT. So an ADT is an associate degree for transfer. Later on in this presentation, I'm going to be going over more of that, but that's another beneficial thing that you can take advantage of in order to be competitive. Another thing that we have right here in the bottom is a reminder, again, applying to an impacted campus or major will require you to be competitive. And some of the things that we have included here might be their minimum. It all depends on the campus and the major. Okay, so I said I was going to talk about major prep, and we're going to get into it. So assist.org. So this is a website where you can find the requirements for your major at the school you want to transfer to, but this is only for CSUs, for California schools. So if you're trying to transfer out of state, you wouldn't be able to utilize this website. But for example, let's say I am transferring to Cal State Fullerton and I want to major in psychology. I would go to assist, I would put the academic year that I plan on transferring to, and that usually just, you would select the most updated year that they have. So if they have 2019 to 2020, I would click that. If they actually have 2020 to 2021, I would click that. And then institution, you would put Rio Hondo College because that is the institution that you attend. And then agreement with other institutions. You would put the campus that you'd want to transfer to. So in my case, I would put Cal State Fullerton. And then I would put new agreements, and then it takes you to another page where you can click the major. So I would go all the way down, scroll down until I find psychology. So once I click on psychology and I click on view agreements, I'll be able to see the major prep requirements for that campus. However, you do have to remember that each campus varies when it comes to major prep requirements. So I think in the previous example, I said Long Beach GPA was 3.7, whereas Cal State Fullerton's GPA was a 3.5 for a psychology major. So I would assume that Cal State Long Beach has more major prep requirements than does Fullerton. Highly selective majors, so sciences, engineering, psychology, those majors evaluate students based on major prep courses completed before you transfer. So let's say you want to start at a Cal State fall 2020, you have to complete these classes no later than summer 2020. It's always important to meet with the transfer counselor earlier to discuss major prep requirements. I know that students sometimes are undecided about what they need to do, or they think that they could do it. I was one of those students. I didn't really know that this existed until later, which is why I did transfer with so many more units than I needed to. But it's really good to meet with a counselor so that way they can go over this website and to see what you need to take and what you don't really need to take. Just narrow it down. Okay, we're going to continue with the being competitive. What else you can do to be competitive? So I did mention earlier an ADT. So that is an associate degree for transfer. And what this is, it's a degree that allows a student at the community college, so at Rio Hondo, to earn an associate's degree while preparing to transfer to a CSU. So the requirements for this is that you need to fully complete the CSU GE or the IGETC general education pattern sheet. Again, those sheets are available on the Transfer Center website under the general education pattern tab. You need to complete the required 18 units for the ADT major. So all of our majors for the ADT have at least 18 units that you need to take. And those are courses that you would take at Rio Hondo. And the last requirement is that you need to at least earn a 2.0 GPA. Well, what are some of the benefits for this? So you are guaranteed admission to the CSU system. So what that means is you are guaranteed admission to at least one out of the 23 CSUs. I know that might sound a little scary because I know some students think, well, if I'm applying to Southern California, but none of the schools accept me, then they're gonna send me all the way to Northern California. I've never really worked with or helped a student where that was the case. Let's say you apply to 4 of your top CSUs. Generally, it's like you'll get accepted to at least one of those schools. But again, that's just, I've never worked with another student where it was the other case where they weren't accepted to any of the top schools that they applied to. What else? Benefits. Okay. So the program is deemed similar at the CSU. So I know at Rio Hondo, we have early childhood education, I believe. And that's essentially like a child development major for an ADT. So even though it's called something different at Rio Hondo, when you do apply to a CSU, it might be called the same or it might be called child development. Another example is at Rio Hondo, I'm not sure if we have administration of justice or criminal justice, but the CSU, it's called something else. So it's either called administration or criminal justice. But they're deemed similar. They're very similar. Another benefit, you are admitted as a junior status. I know I said that earlier. So what that means is that because you have already completed at least 60 units, you're halfway there. You only need no more than 60 additional units to complete a BA degree, which is why we say that usually when you transfer, it should take you about 2 more years in order to receive your bachelor's degree. However, again, that all depends on each student, each individual student, and how they want to take classes. The last benefit, which I think is a huge benefit, is a GPA bump. So depending on the CSU, right now you will receive a 0.1 to a 0.2 GPA bump. And let me tell you where this comes in handy. Let's say you're applying to a school and you're barely meeting the minimum GPA requirements. With this GPA bump, you would meet the requirement or a little bit above the GPA requirements. So that already helps you and makes you more competitive. All right, so at Rio Hondo, we do offer 29 associate degree for transfers. We have an associate in science degree for transfer, which is an AST, and an associate in arts degree for transfer, which is an AAT. So as you can see, we have administration of justice, biology, business administration, chemistry, physics, as part of the sciences, to name a few. And then for the arts, we have anthropology, art history, English, studio arts, psychology, social justice studies, to name a few. So you have a variety to choose from. All right. A website that is very handy when preparing to do more research on transferring, or if you have any other questions about transferring, is the California State University website. So you can find this website at www.calstate.edu. It's important you put the 2 in there. I know when I first saw this, I was like, is that a typo? It's not, you just need to put the 2 in there. And there is a page where it talks about transfer planning. They have a bunch of different resources here. For example, what do you need to transfer, impacted majors and campuses, especially if you're a STEM major, you can find information there. It talks about ADTs, and then help for low income and educationally disadvantaged students, or other resources that are on there that are amazing. All right, and that concludes our presentation. I wasn't sure how in-depth you guys wanted this to be, but if you do have more questions, you can find us. Go on the Rio Hondo website and then go under Transfer Center. We have our phone number listed there. We do have a virtual chat room. So we're on there every day during our office hours. If you have a question, you could just go ahead and chat and then we'll reply to you immediately. You can email us as well. Right now for summer, we don't have any counselors working. However, we can still help you out and we can help you set up a meeting or send you to another counselor that's doing Express around campus. So yeah, thank you for listening to our Transfer 101 presentation about the CSUs.